Welcome to the Escape the Drift podcast. I'm Dr. Jacob Egbert, and today I'm going to talk about the ego. Now, I want to do this in a very light and less serious way. I know a lot of my podcasts can get a little kind of like heavy and maybe serious at times, and that's just often who I am when I get into these moments of like trying to explain something that's on my mind, and I want to articulate it in the best way. Today, I wanted to just be light. Why? I just feel like it. So I'm going to go that direction. Now, I don't know a lot about the ego from a psychological perspective in the history of Sigmund Freud and how he describes it as it compares to the id and the superego. You know, I've studied that in psychology courses in college many years ago. And honestly, I don't remember all the details. So I'm going to use a more like street level ego definition today. And then I'm going to get into what I want to really talk about. And that is using the ego for the power of good, in addition to dissolving the ego for the greater good. And we're going to get into both of those. So the ego, essentially what I understand this to be, street level, is the self-orientation, the look at me, the me, I am, the ego. So the ego is oftentimes put down as a negative. Oh, his ego, her ego. Don't let your ego get in the way. Well, great advice in many situations. But today what I want to talk about is how the ego can serve you and the best way to use the ego for kicking ass in life. So, where I got this idea of the ego being like a good thing, there was a podcast I was listening to with John Danaher, who is probably the best jiu-jitsu coach of all time, one of the greatest philosophical minds of martial arts. And he coaches Gordon Ryan, who happens to be the best jiu-jitsu player of all time. Okay, fine. He had a team, the Danaher Death Squad. And this team was like 5 or 6 high-level competitors. And of course, some others that joined in here and there, but these top competitors. And in the pandemic, they had to relocate from New York to Puerto Rico so they could keep training, because New York was stupid and didn't let anybody do anything, whatever. So they go to Puerto Rico, and of course, it's a new environment. These people are getting better. And the question was asked to John Danaher, like, how do you manage the egos? How do you keep the egos out of the way? And he's like, you don't. Either the egos are necessary. The egos are necessary for competitors. And that just like immediately was a shift for me. Like, that's awesome. I understand that. I understood it almost immediately, in my way at least. And that's what I want to talk about. Well, eventually this group of people broke up and went separate ways. A few of them just couldn't manage themselves within that dynamic. Fine. I don't think that has anything to do with what I'm going to talk about today. But the point is that as a competitor, as the person in the gym who wants to excel and be the best, their ego, their self-identity is vital. And that ego can serve them very well, as it can serve you in your own life. That's what I want to talk about. So being egoic, that's maybe where it gets negative, where being full of yourself, perhaps. And I don't think that term ego is as broad as that. Like, it doesn't include all of that. It's probably similar to toxic masculinity. Well, just because you assign the term toxic to masculinity does not mean that masculinity is toxic. Obviously it isn't. It's quite the opposite. Yet, within a masculine spectrum, there are those that are toxic, and of course many others that are not. So within ego, there are those that are egoic and jerks and selfish and otherwise not workable to be around. And yet there are those that are serving their ego and can be genuine and compassionate and serving of others. And I want to explain how. So, and that's why I kind of want to like use these words without that blanket definition of ego is all one thing and it's all bad and it's all associated with being egoic or selfish or self-centered. Okay. Well, egocentric would be that self-centeredness, centering the self. Fine. But here's what I want to say. So I've done some psychedelics in my life, and I've had the experience that many have described as the dissolving of the ego dissolution, where that view of yourself dissolves and you essentially see yourself, you see you as a part of all of it. And it's a very beautiful experience, and it's probably one of the most powerful, transformative things I've experienced, and really has set me on this course of my current purpose and endeavors. Okay. So the ego dissolution, where I saw that the I was part of everything. Like I am you, you are me, I am the trees, I am the universe. Which I believe. And to be able to get it and to experience it and feel it is fascinating and beautiful. And it really connects you with nature and others and the whole motion of existence. So within that, you come back to, out of this experience, back to the you are an individual. And you have your own choices to make and your own actions to take. And within that realization that you continue to operate as an individual, as a self, as an I, as an ego, you can choose how to be within your ego. And similar to the masculinity example, you can choose to be egoic, egocentric, self-centered, or you can choose to be the self that is serving, the self that is compassionate, the self, the individual that operates for all. Okay. Well, isn't that in effect a version of being everything, of dissolving the ego? Maybe in intention, or maybe in the effect of the actions. But I would challenge that. I would say the best way that an individual, because you are physically an individual, that has consciousness that is separate from my consciousness, although we do share some consciousness here and there, you have the opportunity as that individual to act as an individual with specific impact on the whole, as well as other individuals. So you play a role, and this is the term that I like to use. As you become familiar with your ego, the you that you want to push forward, the costume or the role you want to play, the costume you want to wear, the version of individual that you choose to put out there can be created. And this is where it gets nuanced. And this is a big part of my whole meditation program and mindset training and coaching program. The ability to get that you are not how you wound up being. The you, the observer, has the ability to choose, to create, to shift trajectory, to choose the path in front of you. You didn't choose the path necessarily behind you. Bits and pieces you did, but you are largely caught in the drift until you recognize that you have the ability to choose and create forward. It reminds me of this beautiful quote that every man lives two lives, and the second one starts when he realizes there's only one. kind of a little play on words there and a twist of thought, but it's very impactful when you think about that. So once you have this awareness, you have this aha, this ego dissolution experience where you realize you are everything, and then you come back to that you are an individual, and you see through these new eyes the opportunity that you have to become completely who you choose to be. That every aspect of your life is up to you. That you have the responsibility and the opportunity to be however and whoever and whatever you choose. That's when life starts. And I could go on for hours on this, and actually I have in my program, the meditation course. It really dives into the created self. I just want to say this about this meditation program because I have not done a great job to this point of sharing and promoting what it actually is. You hear the term meditation course, you're like, I'm going to learn how to meditate. That's the first 10%. The rest is how to prepare your intention to go into meditation. Once you're there, how do you go into the subconscious mind? Once you've created new patterns and thoughts, how do you implement it into the life that you live out here, outside of meditation? It goes on and on into language and alignment and purpose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the point of all that is to say this, that as one who has the ability to choose, to create, to choose the role or the position in life that you want, that's when your life begins. And it begins because you say so. And you get to do this at any moment, and you can choose a new path. You can choose a new direction. You can choose a new way of being. You can become whatever you choose. And a lot of people don't really want to do that. You know, they're like, I'm just going to stick with the way I've always been because this is how other people have accepted me, and I'm comfortable the way it is. So it's the way we've always done it, and I'm just going to keep coming home, sitting on the couch, watching a Netflix program of the day, have the dinner, get up and go to work, and Groundhog Day that the rest of my life because it's comfortable. And they'll accept it. And that's fine. That's not you. You want more. And perhaps you want more, but you don't know what. Because you haven't chosen who you are. This is such a beautiful concept, you know, and I wanted this to be light, and then I got all deep about this, but it's just hard not to. The beauty of being able to choose who you are in the world. It's moving, it's inspiring. When I see others that have done it, that are free, no matter what they choose, it's beautiful. Because in choosing and living into that choice is beauty. Whatever role that you fully choose and design for yourself, amazing. So, the challenge of this particular episode is to look at who you are. Really look, perhaps meditate on who you are. And do you love it? And I don't mean like self-value, like you love yourself, of course, like that's great, you love you. But are you doing that which lights you up? Are you up to that which is your purpose? Does it drive you? Or do you feel stuck? Do you feel like there's got to be more? This isn't it. How did I end up here? I did what I was supposed to do, and this is what I was left with. I'm going to tell a little story. And this might get a little deep, but it might be personal. I mean, it is personal, but I went through a transition, and I'm going to free this. Like, none of this is planned. This isn't scripted, and this is me just going off because to me, it's important. It's on topic of ego, sure. My life into my adulthood didn't feel like I chose it. At some point, like I got to a point where I'm like, this is uncomfortable. And it got really uncomfortable about 10 years ago. And maybe earlier, 12. I was really busy, and perhaps that was sublimation. It's a good word to look up, sublimation. Perhaps there was some sublimation in my pursuits. So I went to college with the intention of initially being a psychologist. I wanted to be a counselor, a family counselor of all things. And essentially I wanted to help people live better lives and be happier with their choices and their relationships. And 15, how many years later is this? 20 years later, I'm essentially doing that in a much more strategic and surgical way with many more layers than what I had seen as a 22-year-old. But essentially that's what I wanted to do. And I took some psychology courses, and I was looking at all these journals that they had to read, and I was like, this is boring. It's just a bunch of words on paper. And then I had friends that were going into med school, so I'm like, well, that's challenging, and I love the human body, so why don't I do that? So I went into medical school, and I pre-med, I started pursuing that, and that pursuit, the chase of the thing that was the hardest thing to do at the time, like that's all I knew, was that getting into medical school was the hardest thing that a person could do in college. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. Bring it on. And I chased that. I got married early on, like first semester of college, in a drift type experience. There's the drift of my culture. I was Mormon. You go on a mission. I did that. And I'll talk about that later. But essentially, I got off the mission, and I met a girl, and I'm like, all right, this one's good. And I had the feelings of, let's do this within weeks. And it was so impulsive. I've got an impulse issue. I'm just going to say that. I still do. And I got married, and I had a child within a year. And I'm like, all right, here we go. And during that time, chose to go to medical school. So I'm pursuing this big challenge. I've got a kid. I'm married. Life is good. But it was just like, that's what you do. At 22 years old, I was married with a child. I hadn't even started life yet. And yet I was full of responsibility. And I can get into the nuance of that, and I'm not going to. Point being that I started off on this trajectory, and I was deep in it. Med school is challenging. It is like the most challenging total body experience that you can undergo. And during that time, I was not tuned into my relationship. I was not tuned into my kids. I had 3 by the time I graduated medical school. And they were beautiful little kids, they're just little, cute. And I would just see them as I passed to rotations and studies and tests. And in the meantime, I tried to become an athlete. So I was doing triathlon training, just chasing, as you do when you're in your 20s. And unfortunately, I had kids and a wife that kind of got neglected as I was pursuing the knighthood of the 20s. Anyway, pursue, get into the residency program, learn, become skilled. And there were so many moments where I was just like, I'd have moments of like, what am I doing? How did I get here? what is it about this particular avatar that I chose years ago? Oh, who was that chose this egoic position in life? So now I have this ego, this self that loved the pursuit, but wound up in a deep part of the woods where it's like, how did I get here? And those conversations began early in med school. College, I was cool. Med school, it started to get rough. And then I got into internship, which was hell. Pure, absolute hell. Every criteria for major depressive disorder, I had it. But so did all of my fellow interns and residents. This is when things started to turn. And then I got into residency, it was a little lighter, a little easier. But the dissatisfaction started to get deep into the bones. And so eventually I got out of that and got my first real job. And I talked about this in the last episode. It didn't serve me well because I was still chasing, I was pursuing, I wanted more. I wanted people to be really healthy and happy. And I was just like, how can I bring this joy to the world? And it's like exercise and nutrition. And so I'm pursuing this and I'm speaking at national conferences and I'm flying around. And meanwhile, I have kids and a wife. And I didn't like it. I didn't like that life. Love my kids. They're beautiful. And I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. I'm like, how did I end up here? And so I blew it up. I had an affair. I got fired from my job, which I talked about in the last episode. And it was just, I left this religion. I'm like, no. That was the breaking point where I was covered in this shell of supposed to. I was caught in the drift so deeply that I couldn't take it anymore. And I blew it up, like exploded. I ended up with literally, I had to borrow money from my parents to pay taxes that year. I had $0 in the bank. I had no job. I got divorced. I was separated from my kids. And I quickly turned it around. I got a job immediately. Like I never missed supporting my family, but there were moments where I literally went to zero. And I had to move out of state because I wasn't employed, and on and on and on. This just got deep. Because I made choices that weren't true to me. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. A lot. And I was good at it. I was the golden child. There was, my parents would be like, he's the doctor and he's got the wife and the kids and the good Mormon boy. And that was it. And I was athletic and I was handsome and I had it all. And it felt awful. And so I blew it up. 8 years ago, divorced, and finalized, separated 10 years ago. A lot of growth happened after that. And a lot of resolve to choose who I am, to never do what I was supposed to do again. And this is where the ego comes into play. I am who I say I am. Who I say I am in every aspect of my life. Now, there are some residual things that are still there. Like, here's the reality. I am trained as a physician, and that is where I am able to make a living for the support of my family. I make a lot of money as a physician relative to what I could do without being a physician. Honestly, like my last job before being a doctor, I made $6 an hour. And then doctor. I do not have any other marketable skills of significance. So that's a residual. Okay, cool. It's fine. I choose to continue to use that tool to support my family. And every other aspect of me is my choice. And it's beautiful. I have adopted the ego of who I am within this world of which I am a part. So the role that I have chosen to play is Dr. Jacob Egbert, with the purpose of elevating the experience of being human, with the intention of shepherding those looking to escape the drift. 10 years ago, I escaped the drift, and it took me about 5 years to get out of the fog. And once I was out of the fog, it's beautiful. And if I can help anyone go through that process without the pain to the level that I experienced it, I'll do what it takes. And this is why the Escape the Drift podcast exists. Because I want to be able to share the voice of creation, the voice of responsibility, the voice of choosing how to be in the world from a deep perspective, not a superficial, eat your healthy diet and go to the gym, but long to be a part of a community and perform at a level of excellence that impresses you. That's far more motivating than six-pack abs and big muscles. I want to share those lessons that I learned that brought me out of the fog, out of the darkness, out of the current. As I use my ego, I had a meditation this morning. I'm going to share this. Every day I meditate, I start with creating an empowering context. It's essentially a statement of positive outlook, a gratitude of sorts, and a way of seeing the world that feels powerful. Powerful meaning nothing is wrong. The opposite of something is wrong, but that this is right. It is good. So I create an empowering context every day, and then I follow it with an intention. And so today's empowering context was this: no one is better at this than me. No one is better at this than me. What is this? This is being me. This is me fulfilling my purpose in life, putting on the suit of this particular individual, this ego that is me. Nobody is better at this than me. And that's powerful for me. That feels powerful. And that is egoic in the benevolent way, however you want to look at it. But when I look at myself, I'm like, you know what? No one's better at this than you. And as such, I've got responsibility because I choose to have responsibility. I choose to put myself out there in the world in such a way that I can be of service to others, that I can be a light, be like, look, I've been down this path and I can show you the way. You're going to have some bumps and bruises, but you know what? It'd be really cool if you avoided this and maybe you chose that. I wish I had had someone to help me that I could talk to, that I could ask questions of. And I had a few along the way, but I had not very many. I didn't have somebody that could help me skip over some of those parts that were very, very challenging for not only me, but my family. So I want to be that person to help others. Maybe not this, maybe this. Let me just say this. I'm not saying I'm going to hold your hand as you walk and I'm going to help you avoid the pain. No. But you don't necessarily have to blow up your life to get out of the drift that you're caught in. Perhaps when you start to feel that discomfort and you're like, this is not where I'm supposed to be, we have a conversation. And we dive into that discomfort in such a way that you become powerful in choosing and creating your person moving forward. Your person, yourself, your individual. In such a way that you don't destroy a family, that you don't lose a job and have to move away from your children, that you don't embarrass community members and ruin relationships of others. The pain of becoming a new version of you is enough. I can guarantee you that. You do not have to do that to other people. So, who do you want to be? What role do you want to play on this game board of life? We're all the same. We're all connected. We're all each other. I am you. You are me. And as such, who do you want to play in this game? I'm playing this. This is what I do. And I'm going to be the best at it. Well, I already am. But I'm going to get better and better and better because I pursue excellence. It feeds the ego because this ego wants to be the best at what it does. And as such, I have to keep trying and trying and trying, practicing, sucking over and over again. So, the ego. I got through that challenging time with a lot of heartache. Wow, 10 years of challenge. It's still hard at times. I've reconciled with my ex in such a way that I would say we're very friendly. We've vacationed together. We spend holidays together at times. She comes over all the time. So, she'll watch our kid, Amelia and I's child. And I'm certain there's still heartache and pain on her side. I can't take that away. And we can communicate friendly, and the kids only benefit. I have a beautiful wife who I'm fully committed to and excited to be with. And I create that relationship over and over and over. It's the most amazing, beautiful part of my life. I'm pursuing the things that are most valuable to me. This endeavor, your human experience. I chose this as I created what is the most powerful thing that I can do. And there are layers that haven't yet been fulfilled, as there is always going to be something in front of me. I'm pursuing my physical goals and dreams, building wealth in a business that will serve me for the rest of my life and my children's lives is my goal. And I'm connected to heart. Not just mine, but yours. In such a way that I will serve your needs as I'm able to. I'm committed to other as part of this big group of humans, of organisms, of universe, of life. And that is the role that I choose to play for no other reason other than serves me. I got to choose it. I don't have to. Nobody told me to. I wasn't supposed to. And that is why it's so beautiful. I don't do what I'm supposed to. I do what I say. This is the Escape the Drift podcast, and I am Dr. Jacob Egbert.